welcome once again to another session of Computer Accounting 2. Just to recap, we discussed about databases and we're able to follow the steps on how to back up a database, how to restore a backed up database, and how to delete a database. And if there is one thing to realize there, it is that it's really very important or of utmost importance to safeguard the databases of a company. That's why we as auditors in the future should be able to test the safeguards employed by the companies to their databases and hold people who are and hold the people accountable to those who safeguard or to those who have the custody of the databases. I also introduced yesterday the relationship of accounting systems in the databases. Now, it's really not a good practice to enter our transactions immediately in the databases because we know that it is very vulnerable or susceptible to errors and even fraud. Just imagine that you can just update, insert data, or even delete data without historical evidence, unless, of course, you have another database that is backed up from the past or prior to the insertion or deletion of data. But that would be very time consuming. Just imagine comparing two databases and you wouldn't know when it happened. So anyway, let's go back. I will be introducing to you this afternoon an accounting system, and this is SAP Business One. Let's look into the relationship between the two, as to relationship between the two, SAP Business One and how they relate to each other in terms of data. All right. So instead of instead of entering directly our data in the database or MSSQL, just like what we did yesterday, we created tables, we were able to insert data like your names, address. You should have another interface specifically made for users. At least you have a safeguard to your databases. Also, business applications such as accounting systems will have that interface friendly enough for the non-technical people to enter their data. And so I'll be opening to you my SAP Business One. So I'll just fit this in my screen. Alright. I'll click on change company for me to be able to see the companies that's maintained here. One company corresponds to one database. Alright, and so the database is actually connected to this application or system, SAP Business One. So if I look into my MSSQL right now, this is my MSSQL. The databases present here are the same databases that you can find in my SAP Business One. Alright, so this is actually your interface as a user, but the actual data is being fetched from the MSSQL. So for purposes of illustration, I'll be using this one, OAC Computers UK, with the database name SBO Demo GB. Alright, so I'll put in my user ID and my password. So I'm now able to gain entry because I know my user ID and my password. Alright. Just let me make a few adjustments here. The year now is 2020, but the system is still on the year 2012. Okay, for me to be able to transact the current date, I should make this year first. Alright, this will not be long. Okay, next is 2014. The reason why we are creating this, or the system has this feature, is because we have to divide the life of the business into years, and from years we have to divide it into sub periods, because we all know that we cannot just enter transactions for periods that have been closed already. Okay, so we can actually lock a period. So we are now in the year 2017. Let me add 3 more. 2018. Oh, sorry, 2019. And finally, the year 2020. Alright. So I am looking at all the modules here because I'm given with the authorization as super user. So for other application controls, we will have that in some other time. For now, our role or our focus is on the relationship between the accounting system and the database for MSSQL for this example. So this is sales AR module wherein I can find AR invoice. For us users, we call this as invoice. This is actually ready for a new transaction, which is transaction number 225. It contains information relevant to an AR invoice. So each field here, call this as attribute, and then one thing that will come to mind is that where are the other records, because we are now in invoice number 225. So where is invoice number 1 to 224? Now it's actually there. All you have to do is fetch or view. Now as a user, all I have to do is use this toolbar, part of the toolbar. This would mean the first data, and I am now looking at data number 1 of my invoice. Then I can click on this for the next data or record. Alright, and so on. If I want to view all the list of invoices, again asterisk would mean all numbers of these invoices. So I'll be looking at invoice number 1 up to the last invoice, which is number 224. Now let me look at my database if it's really indeed 224 records in all. So this is my MSSQL. This is where the data are stored from that company that I just looked or opened a while ago from SAP Business One. The database name was actually sbo.gb, and the tables are actually here. So of course, the tables would include the table about the invoice. Now, if you notice that table names here are not the same as the table or the records name here or the file. For this instance, this is AR invoice. Now I cannot find AR invoice here. Alright, so what does it mean? It means that in my table it has a different label. So for me to know what table name is AR invoice, at least in SAP Business 1, it will tell me by clicking on this part of the menu bar, which is system information. If I mouse over, you can see on the bottom part left side OINV, that is actually the name of the table. So it's not, again, it's not AR invoice in the database, but rather OINV. Alright, so let's go to this part. OINV. Can you still remember how to fetch data? What SQL statement should I make or type? Alright, so I'll click on this one, new query. I'll type select, then from, okay, what database, what table name. So in this example, OINV. Right, I'll click execute. So I am now seeing the table OINV here. So the manner of arrangement is not the same as the manner of arrangement in SAP Business 1. Here, one record is horizontal. It contains all the fields. Okay, so it's actually very long to the right. Okay, let me just readjust the screen. And then this is record number 2, 3, and so on. There are actually 224 records here, which is the same as in my SAP Business 1, which is up to 224. 225 is still empty. Okay, so say for example, I create a new transaction. Okay, again, here the last record is 224. Okay, here also is 224. I'll create a new invoice. Okay, I'll just put in the customer here. Okay, so this is another feature telling me wherein the customer has exceeded credit limit already, and since I am a super user, then I'm able to override that one. Alright, so anyway, as auditors, we should be very strict when it comes to the implementation of policies. Alright, okay, this is just for illustration purposes on the relationship between accounting systems and the database. When it comes to application controls, input controls, processing controls, output controls, we'll be dealing that in another session. Alright, I'll put in the items. Okay, so say for example this item, there is an order of 10 quantities. So already computed. Let's say I'll add this. Okay, so I have just processed invoice number 225 is now ready for another transaction. 226, it's blank, but let me retrieve my 225th invoice, and so this is the one. We'll be sending this document to that customer as a sign of or as a proof of our sales transaction. In our database, let's look at the update. So is it already updated? So this was the last query. For me to be able to look at the latest one with transaction number 225, I will type select asterisk from OINV, right, and then click execute. Notice that the database is already updated with this record 225. Reporting comes easy as long as the data are already inputted or encoded. Alright, so that is the relationship between the database and the business application. For this particular example, this is SAP Business One, an accounting system. Okay, I'll close this. So I hope you have learned the relationship between the applications or accounting systems and MS SQL.